Okay, so the goal of this meeting is to do a quick review of two topics that we have selected, and we will try to fit our explanations in less than 15 minutes.
Okay.
So we already talked about dedicating the meeting in talking about WP source. That is a package that Frontity has to connect to the WordPress API, and
And I am going to
CSS.
talk about, CSS in JS and the emotion library that Frontity uses.
Okay, so I can start. I'm going to put a timer to remind myself that the explanation should fit in 15 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen, share screen. And I'm going to start with the docs to do my explanation. So here in Frontity packages, there is a package called Frontity WP source. This package is by default installed when you install one of the themes, the Mars theme or the 2020 theme. And as every package, there are some settings that needs to be done or that are recommended to be done in the Frontity settings.js. For that, there is a specific part in module exports, there is a packages, and you can set some data, some configuration for specific packages. So for example, for the
You're breaking up there.
for example, you get the API, the state source API.
Yeah, you need to repeat a little, I think, Juanma, because you're breaking up.
API. Okay. Now, can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better. Yeah, you were breaking up for a few seconds there, so I think we lost your explanation.
Okay, I was saying that as every package, it needs or it may need some configuration to be set in the Frontity settings.js file. So for example, here we can see how for the package Frontity WP source, we can set the API URL. That this is the URL of your WordPress installation, your WordPress REST API. So the package will connect here for every URL. So we can set here things such as the source API, source subdirectory, source homepage, source postpage, source category base, source tag base, source post endpoint, source params, source post types, source taxonomies. So these are things that we can set in the Frontity settings. The most important ones, I think, are state source API that is required. This is not optional. This is the URL of the WordPress installation. Homepage and post page is needed if you have changed the settings of your default WordPress installation. If you have set a different homepage, for example, or a different post page, you need to update this value here accordingly to what you have set in your WordPress installation. Well, these are also required if you have changed or if you want, for example, a different post endpoint. Is you need to change this if you want a different endpoint to get your post. For example, you have set a custom endpoint, a custom post type that you want to use by default, as if those were your posts. You can change that here. And for
So
example,
does that overwrite the WP JSON endpoint that is in the API parameter?
no, I think that this post endpoint, what it's going to do is, by default, when you require a post, it's going to look for /post and then all the params that you can set. For example, here,
I see.
you can set by default, instead of post, /products or projects or any other endpoint that you want to use by default.
Mm-hmm.
Another set that you can do is source params. This will be params that will be used on every request the package is going to do to the WP REST API. For example, by default, you can ask for 5 results per page or some other params.
Mm-hmm.
You also need to define custom post types in order to get them from the state in Frontity. So what WP source are going to do is going to do a request to the WP REST API, and it's going to put all that information in the state of Frontity. So if we go to Frontity, and we go to this, if we go to this demo page here, every Frontity project, we can access here things such as the state. In the state, we have different parts. These parts are related to packages. So this part, state source, this is all the data that the WP source package is managing. All the requests from the WP REST API are going to be put here. So we have some information that has already been retrieved from the API and have been put directly here. I will come back here later. Okay, so in order to have access to the custom, in order to have access to the custom post type here, we need to configure this custom post type in the Frontity settings. So we need to add a property post types, and there, this is an array with objects configuration for every post type. We need to add the type, the endpoint, and the archive. It's all explained here.
Mm-hmm.
The same for custom taxonomies. If we want to have access here for that information, we need to configure the state source taxonomies in this way that is explained here. So, how to use this package? The WP source package provides a few methods. The most important ones are fetch and get. Fetch is the one that it's actually going to perform a request of the link. What is called a link? It's going to perform that that request, and then get, this method is not going to actually perform any request. What it's going to do is going to get the information this is going to get the link information that is here in data. Get is going to look for the link and is going to retrieve all the information that is here. And as you can see, this is not really the content of the link. This is like a metadata of the link. It's information about the link, where you can see things such as if, for example, here, we can see the type of the information. In this case, this is a post, the ID of the post, if the information is ready or is fetching. If this value is false, that means that this post hasn't been fetched yet. That means that this post with this ID is not available in the state source. For example, here, there is that post hasn't been fetched, so the full information is not here. But if we go to other posts, for example, the ones with the ID 1, age, let's try to find them. I think the beauty of Gulfos. Here. Okay, if we go and we click here, and if we check Frontity state source data, the beauty of Gulfos, we can see that is really true. That means that that link has already been fetched, the information there, and in the ID 60, we should have available the full information of the post. So ID 60, if we go here, ID 60, we have here the full information of the post. So the important ideas to have there to understand here is that there is this data property that we can use to retrieve information about the links, and we have a method to already get the information here. That is the source.get is this method, source.get. But if we don't have, if the is ready is false, we don't have available the whole information. So we should do a fetch before. So what we can look here is if the data is a category, and the data is a category, that means that there are some links already in that associated to that page. So we can as we have done the fetch first, we can assure that the information will be already in the state source, and we can access the full info of every link in type, that in this case it will be a post, and the ID. So state.source.post dot 4, 5, 60, 78, whatever, we can get the whole information of every post. And from that information, we can get things such as the title or the content or whatever. So this is like the typical way of using these methods. So there is this method source.fetch that is going to perform a request of the data. The interesting thing about this method is that it is isomorphic. That means that this method is prepared to be called from the server side and from the client side. And another cool thing is that internally it remembers the request that has been done. So if you do a second fetch of the same link, it's not going to actually perform that request. It's just going to return the result that has been previously requested. This is interesting. That's the fetch.
Yes, fetch will take time. The first time it does it, it's going to take time because it needs to get the data from the server. The second time, it's remembered it, so it'll be instant.
Exactly.
And then get is always instant because that data already exists.
Exactly.
In source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is interesting because sometimes you want to perform a custom fetch from the server side, and then do the same request on the client side. For example, with the before SSR hook that is available, and then in the use effect in the component. You can do that because the client side fetch is not going to be done if the before SSR has already been done. So there is a use case where this information is very relevant. Okay, so we have it, but we can add a force true to force to do the request if we want to do it, even if it has been previously done. So the source get is going to get us like the metadata of the link. For example, this type of information, if it's an archive, the ID of the resource, if it's ready, if the information has already been fetched or not, or if it is in progress, the fetching. We can check this value, for example, to put a loader in our component to indicate that the information is being fetched. And then in the source, as we saw here, besides this data, the information here should be get with the get method. We have a lot of other fields. For example, a post, for example, category, and this is the information that the package is going to put here from the request done to the REST API. So this is what is explaining here. We can access things such as taxonomy. For example, category source.category.23 is going to get us all the information from the category 23. Or source.tag.13 is going to get us the full information of the tag 13. And the same for the type. We have a source.
And what about if you have a custom taxonomy? So there in line 3, source.deal. Deal is a custom taxonomy, presumably.
Yes,
there.
yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or for example, a custom post type that is product is the same. If we have if we have defined the custom post type in the Frontity settings, then we will have that information available here. If we have done the fetch. Okay, then we have some low-level libraries, api.init. This is interesting because we can, in runtime, change the default API library. For example, by doing this, we can initialize a default REST API. We can overwrite the one that we have set in the Frontity settings. Okay, and then we can perform a request for a specific endpoint of a specific REST API. So this is interesting if we want to perform a request to a different endpoint, even one that is in a different REST API. These are very low level. In fact, I think that the source.fetch internally does something like this. It internally does something like api.get. But then this api.get performs the request, and API source populate merge that information in the state source. So populate is the one in charge to put the information here. So as these are very low-level methods, we need to do that manually. Perform the request and then populate the information in the state. These methods are important if we create our own handlers. Handlers are elements that we can use to define our own links. So every time we do a fetch to a specific link that is not defined in the REST API, we can define a specific logic to be done here, and we can use a pattern. So product dot Slack, we can use this Slack to perform a request to another endpoint of a different REST API, and as you can see here, we are using the populate and the API methods that are the api.get and the populate methods. Okay.
So you can use that to, if you say want to embed a map, a Google map in your page, you to make a request to that separate API.
Yes,
in that
exactly.
way. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, these methods are specialized in doing requests to WordPress REST APIs.
I see. Right. So you can't use other, or it'd be harder to use other APIs that weren't WordPress based.
You can do requests, but I don't know if this method, I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure that you can use some other methods like Axios or some other libraries like that, Axios, to perform the request.
Or I guess you could just make a fetch call in within one of your components if you needed to import, say, a map. You wouldn't need to use a handler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can combine all of that. I mean, you can create your own handler. What this combination of methods assures you is that the response that you get with source API get, this response can be populated to the state. So then from the state, you have that information available in all the rest of the components and in the rest of the while the user browses. If you only need a specific information for one component, maybe you don't need to create a handler. But using a handler is a very handy way to create like a custom link and create some logic. So you add custom information in the state
For that particular route.
for that particular route. Yes.
Yeah.
And you can use like patterns, and you can also have like the dynamic parts in the URL. So this can be an ID of something that can be used in the request or whatever.
So it's super flexible then. You can get pretty much anything you need from your WordPress source.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful to do any type of request to any type of REST APIs in any moment of the runtime. So from every component, you can really, you are not attached to only one WordPress REST API, but you can change the default REST API in runtime, or you can do a specific request for a different and merge that in the state. These methods ease you doing this.
Is it worth explaining about proxy objects, because if you go back to your console on your other tab, and when you typed in at the top frontity.state and got the state, you had to go into a proxy object.
Yes, I think
you can't get the source directly. Normally, you'd expect to see the elements in your object directly under there, but Frontity uses proxy objects, doesn't it?
Okay, let's take note of this, and we can explain that in another session, the proxy.
Sure. Okay.
But as a quick explanation, a proxy object is like a wrapper for a typical object, and you can add logic in between. So every time you access a property, you can do more things. By default, you can filter the access, and you can do a lot of things.
Okay, so maybe we can have a run through that. That could be interesting to use as a Frontity, so we can run through that in another discussion, maybe.
Okay, I think that I'm done with the explanation. There are some more things that can be explained, but I think that I have explained some key ideas that I wanted to.
Sure, it was super interesting, and yeah, I learned some stuff from that, definitely.
Okay, so now it's your turn. You can talk about the.
Sure. So if you stop sharing your screen, and if I then share mine. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project. And because I'm going to be demoing some CSS here, let's call it CSS demo. And we'll just wait while that sets up. It doesn't take too long.
What are you going to talk about specifically?
What I'll do is will just do a demo of using CSS in JS and using Emotion, because Emotion is embedded into Frontity. Okay. Emotion is a CSS in JS library. There's a number of ways of doing CSS in JS, but Emotion just makes it super easy. Right, so we have our project. So let me just change into that project and open up code. And yeah, so we have a pretty standard install of Frontity with the Mars theme. So let's get that running so we can see what we're doing. Okay, but I don't want it running over there, so I will run localhost 3000 here so we can see what's going on. And I'll move that over a bit. So this takes a little bit of time to kick in. While we're waiting for that to happen, I'm going to create a new component. Okay, then there it is. Let's call it banner.js. And we need to import React from React. And we need to import we're going to need to import. There's a number of things we can import that are related to Emotion. There are three specifically: global, which you use if you want to import, if you want to apply a style globally across across your site. And you can see that is used here where they've in the Mars theme where they've got a global styles object, which is defined down here.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use CSS. I think that's not used anywhere in Mars theme by default. And then there's styled, which is the most common one you'll see used throughout Mars theme. So you'll see it there, and if I open up pretty much any other component, you'll see styled gets imported, and styled is used throughout.
In the previous component, you
In the
can
index,
see
yeah.
the CSS method in the global styles.
Oh,
there.
yes, they're using, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so they're using the CSS method there. And you can see it takes a template, what do they call those things? Template literals, that's it. And then the CSS is basically a function that returns an object, and that is then used there. And those are, because it's using global, emotion then applies those styles globally. So globally, you will have, that font, and there's not much that's been applied globally here. The way styled works is you define a variable, or a component rather. Head container is actually a component here, and and then styled will return a component which is effectively a div. It returns a div with these styles applied. So where head container is, this will actually be a div. So so if we go and so this is the head container here. If we actually go and inspect that, you'll see that that is the div that gets returned, and emotion also will apply a unique class name to it. So so everything is namespaced. So even if you use the same name in another object, so if you used head container in a different object, that would then have a different class name. So emotion effectively namespaces your classes, so there's no clashes. So it's a very clean way of writing your CSS, and that any CSS within a component is specific to that component. So you don't get all the complications of when you're creating a CSS file of the cascade and a later class overriding an earlier class and so on. I'm sure everyone's encountered that problem and then not been able to figure out why they can't change a margin or padding on something. So this kind of alleviates that problem, because these styles are specific to just to this component. So shall I do a quick demo to see how this works? So we can see some styling in action. Okay, so let's create this banner. So let's just work with styled, because it's the most common one in Mars theme, and we're going to import that from Frontity, because emotion's already baked into Frontity, so we don't need to. And let's actually create our component here. And then we need to export default we'll connect it to the so that we can pass. No, actually, let's keep it simple because we're up against a time constraint here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to put any JavaScript. You can embed JavaScript into your CSS using this, so we could put, conditionals in here that, if there was a certain condition set in your state, the styling would be different, but maybe we can do that on another occasion. But let's just keep it time. So we don't need to do that. So what we can do is return, let's call this banner content. Whoops, got caps lock on. Here is the banner content. And down here, we need to define banner content. Which is a styled div. So this will return a div with the styles in the template literal. So let's give it, I don't know, some padding. And we can write standard CSS in here. Give it some padding, and let's give it a color, I don't know, red, and a background pink. If we save that, and then in our index.js, just below the header, well, okay, first of all, we need to import it, of course. So we'll import banner from /banner and include it below here. We can just use a self-closing component. And if I save that, that shows up there with the stylings that we applied. So if I change that background, say, to green and save, that will automatically change, though it does look pretty hideous. And then if we just inspect that, we'll see, there it is. Here is the banner content. It's just returned a div with a class and which emotion assigns and namespaces it. And here is the CSS that we defined over here. How are we doing for time? Shall I show how we can conditionally change the styling?
Yes, I think that the next thing you can show is how, if you pass a property to the component, how you pass an attribute to banner content.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to import. Okay, we've already imported connect because I was going to use it, but now we need to use that if we're going to get something from the state. Whoop, hit the right key here. And we need to pass state in. Obviously, we need to put something in the state. So in the theme,
I think that you can simplify this. You don't need to add the state here. What I was suggesting is that if you go to the banner JS file, you have there the banner content. That is the component that you have created using the state. So if you do in the return banner content and you add a space and then you add a property there like I don't know, activated, activated
Okay.
equal on or off or whatever.
Yeah.
Then that property is going to be received in the banner content.
That's true. Yes, yes, that's
that
true.
is below.
So let's say on, like so. And then that gets passed as a prop to this.
Yeah, you can change the color, for example, based on this property.
So we need to, because we're in a template literal, we need to have the dollar in front and put a function in here passing props as a parameter. And then if props dot activated is equal to on, and we have to use the ternary conditional here. You can't use if then within a template literal. Then let's say we'll return, we don't want green, otherwise we won't see it. We'll return red. Otherwise, we'll return black. So if I save that, that'll stay red because that is on. If I change that to off, that should change to black, which it does. Now, obviously, this can be, you can get this from the state if you want this to be changed by something else happening elsewhere, by another component, say, then you would use it to the state. But yes, you're right. This is a simpler way to just demonstrate quickly embedding some conditional logic into your styling.
Yeah, that's one of the powerful things of this template strings way of doing things, because you are you have the capability of getting the props of the component, so you can change the values of the CSS property based on the current values of the props. That makes that dynamically very easy to dynamically change the CSS properties.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me just a second. Bear with me.
Okay, so we have the component created with a style. We can pass properties, and then in every value of CSS, we can change specific values based on these properties. So this is an easy way to change CSS values based on properties. But then, okay, continue.
Yeah, so it's so as well as keeping your CSS cleaner and namespacing everything, yes, you can put all kinds of logic into your styling. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have much to add beyond what you.
Yeah, the next step, what you wanted to add there is that you can also connect this to the state.
To the state,
of the Frontity.
Yeah. So I could say in my theme have a property here. Yeah, let's say call it activated. Let's set that to on. Save that. And then in banner.js, because we're getting state here, we could put here state dot theme
state theme
dot activated. And that we set that to on, didn't we? So if I save that, that should change back to red. Oops, no, we're getting an error. Compiled with warnings.
Okay. Check the Frontity settings for a minute.
Yeah.
But have a look at the import React. Maybe the name of the module, I think, is in lowercase, and the the variable should.
Oh yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, I've got them the wrong way around, haven't I? Yes. And then it changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then if I go to the state and change that to off, that should change them to black. But I need to manually refresh it because it's outside of the packages.
Okay. What maybe well, from here, what we could do is add a method in the state that can be called from any component. So the state change and then the CSS property change.
Exactly. Yeah. Should we do that? I mean, we're kind of out of time.
Yeah, we are out of time. I think that this process of changing the state with methods and so on, we can dedicate another session to explain that.